We talk LA Kings season so far, home ice issues, and more with the host of Kings Talk and the All the Kings Men podcast, Jesse Cohen, on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and we are also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the last 17 years. And a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, the LA Kings have a few days off before Thursday's home game against the Florida Panthers. And while most of the time this show is mostly about my opinions and what I have to say, sometimes we like to bring in a different voice, get a different perspective on our Kings. And today we welcome in friend of the show. You should know him well. He is the host of Kings Talk, also does the pre and post game shows for the LA Kings, and he's the host of the All the Kings Men podcast. He is Jesse Cohen. Hey, Jesse, how are you?
Good, Eddie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, and I'm glad to know you're feeling better. You and I, unfortunately, both shared something recently, and that was getting COVID. It was the first time I had it, and I'll be honest, I think I was a little arrogant that I was not going to get it. And then
so it was the first time I had it too, Eddie.
Oh.
And I got to tell you, I was more upset at breaking that streak than I was at feeling bad with having it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I'll admit I was a little arrogant. I'm not saying I was reckless in my life, but I just thought, I'm not going to get it. It just it bounces off of me.
I got the newest booster on Monday. I don't remember what 3 Mondays ago, and then by Thursday night was curled up in the fetal position in bed. So it's either terrible timing or excellent timing. I'm not sure which.
And I actually got it twice. It was something called bounce back COVID, which apparently is rare, and so I don't know how that happened, but I was educated on that. It's possible that you can get it, kind of get over it, but it's not really gone, and it comes back again. So. I missed the Kings season opener and a few other things. But anyway, glad we're both doing better, healthy, and doing what we enjoy. Last time you were on the show was before the preseason started, and you broke some news. Let us know you were hosting the Kings pre- and post-game shows and doing Kings Talk on the Kings iHeart Audio Network. How's the new job going?
It's going well. It's still a work in progress, I suppose. There's a learning curve, like with every new endeavor, but yeah, it's great. We've been getting calls and people have been very complimentary. It's still surreal to me, right? Because I grew up a huge Kings fan and I lived in Long Beach growing up, and so driving to the game, right, coming home was a trek. It wasn't like 5-minute ride home. So I listened to Nick and Daryl for years, and so to be now doing that is. It's an honor, but also a responsibility that I don't take lightly.
Very nice. And I hosted Kings Talk once. I don't know if you know this or not.
I didn't know that.
It was after Game 6 of the 2012 Stanley Cup final.
Sure. Right, where everyone else was otherwise occupied, yeah.
Nick and Daryl they asked me would I host it so Nick and Daryl could go down and enjoy. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Yes, I'll do. And plus, it was the easiest job ever. No one was complaining. Right. No one was asking about trades. It was just like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So, Jesse, I sincerely hope you get the chance to host Kings Talk after a Stanley Cup win.
I also hope for that. Although selfishly, I think I would want to ask somebody else to do it so that I could go join Nick and Daryl. I don't think I'd be allowed, but I'd want to try anyway.
Well, if it happens, I'm available.
Yeah. All right. Your name's in the Rolodex.
So the Kings have had mostly a successful start to the season, 8-3-3, third in the Pacific, fourth in the West. But it's been weird as well. 7-0 on the road and 1-3-3 at home. I don't know I'd go so far at this point to say they're a Jekyll and Hyde type team, but it has definitely been interesting so far. Your takeaway from what we've seen from the Kings to this point?
Well, before the game against Philadelphia, Todd McClellan was asked about the home and road discrepancy, right? I think after the Pittsburgh game. And the explanation he gave after the Pittsburgh game sat really well with me and made perfect sense. And I wish that people, including Todd McClellan, wouldn't have said, well, it doesn't apply anymore after the Philadelphia game. Because after the Pittsburgh game, he basically said, look, we're looking at 6 games. 2 of them were without Arthur Kaliev while he was serving that suspension to start the season. The first game of the season was against Colorado. They were down a man. Arvidsson had not yet been placed on LTIR, so they were literally skating with 19 guys, not 20. 2 of the games were the second game of back-to-backs, where the first game was on the road, the second game was at home. They played Vegas, they played Boston. Like, it's an incredibly small sample size, and it's an incredibly small sample size loaded up with odd games. So the fact that they were 1, 2, and 3 before the Philadelphia game, I was like, all right, yeah, sure. You're going to have weird stretches where weird stuff happens. Then the Philadelphia game happened, and everybody concedes it was probably the worst game of the year. And it's not great that it happens when you're already 1, 2, and 3. So now you're 1, 3, and 3. So if you're already in the mindset to criticize the home record, then sure, it just makes that worse. But it's still only 7 games. You still have all the, the conditions, Arvidsson being out, Kaliev being out for 2 games, the weird back-to-back home and road situations. So, every year we say you got to wait for 20 games to evaluate. I don't think you can decide arbitrarily like, well, we're at the 13 game mark or the 14 game mark, and we're going to do an early evaluation. So I'm not really worried. I understand that the players and the coaching staff have to say what they said after the Philadelphia game because it was a bummer. And listen, my dad flew out from South Carolina. It's the first game he's been to at Crypto.com Arena since Game 6, 2012, the last time you hosted Kingstown.
Wow.
So it was a bummer for him to be out there and for them to lose, right? And I jokingly said on social media, if you want to blame somebody on the loss, you can blame us because it's his first game out there. So, yeah, it was rough, and it wasn't a fun game, and I get it. But it's early, and they are 7-0 on the road. So, yeah, I'm not too concerned, honestly.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way, although I'm a little concerned that a few more home losses and it starts to become a thing, right? It starts to become something that they talk about. I know that they have not done a very good job at home of scoring first for whatever reason, and they've done the opposite, on the road. I don't know if it's just possible to tell your team, guys, let's score the first goal or let's just get off to better starts. It seems like that's, if you're going to look at something, I guess, seems like that's maybe been the difference on the road than at home, getting that first goal and getting off to better starts.
Yeah, I just think we're all sort of, because the road record is 7-0-0, I think we're looking to make a bigger deal out of the 1, 3, and 3 at home. And I get it. I'm a team employee, so it might seem as if I'm providing cover, but I really don't think I am. And I was actually listening to your show the other day, and you used one of my least favorite words, so now I get to scold you on your own show. I can't remember if you were talking about the penalties or the losing at home to Philadelphia, but you said it was unacceptable.
Yeah. And
that's a phrase that I see fans use a lot. And even when I was not affiliated with the organization, I would always try and avoid using that word because unacceptable implies, I can hear the Garcia dog. Unacceptable in my mind applies a penalty. Right? Like if you have a kid or if you're a teacher and kids don't do their homework or whatever, you say this is unacceptable and here's the punishment, right? Here's the consequence of your unacceptable behavior. But we're not in a position to offer consequences to the players. So I always find it sort of interesting when people say like, well, or today at practice, somebody was saying you can't do this or you can't do that. And I kind of just said like, or what? Like, of course they can. I don't even remember what we're talking about, but the notion of you can't do this or you can't do that or this is unacceptable, that it's unacceptable. Like these guys are humans at the end of the day. There's 82 games. You're not going to win them all. You're probably not even going to win, 2/3 of them unless you're Boston last year. So stuff happens. And I don't know. I guess I'm just choosing to focus on the positive at the moment, which is not usually how I roll. So,
Well, the Garcia dog obviously thinks your comments
I don't know your dog's
unacceptable.
name. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think to me, when I hear unacceptable, when I say unacceptable, it's about those comments of they wanted it more than us and that type of thing. I don't want to hear anybody say that, even though I understand why they said it. But we should not hear that from our,
No, but what are they supposed to say? Like it was a bad game.
Yeah.
That's
We're going to talk more with Jesse Cohen, of course. We want to get his thoughts on what we've seen so far from some of the new LA Kings that we're going into this season. We'll do that here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Whether you're on extended travel, bracing for a major weather event, or limited by yet another supply shortage, you are covered, my friend, thanks to our partners at Jase Medical, life-saving antibiotics, and a long list of daily medications that can be ordered in a 1-year supply, even ED generics like Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio prescriptions. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medications. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase, quote, "I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut my pills in half. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit, and I feel secure now. Prices are lower than pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone." End quote. If you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of daily meds, go to jasemedical.com to see if it is offered for you. Remember to use the promo code Locked On for $20 off of your purchase. Oh, there's Jesse. Hi, Jesse. Too many buttons to push sometimes.
Yeah, all of a sudden I got a notification saying I've been removed from the stream.
You have not been removed.
Unacceptable, Eddie. Unacceptable.
You have not been removed. Yeah. The LA Kings face the Florida Panthers Thursday, 7:30 Pacific time. Catch every moment of the hometown broadcast of your LA Kings with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search LA Kings. And I assume that would mean you could also hear Jesse Cohen, the host of Kings Talk, and the pre and post game shows as well. So we didn't get a chance to obviously get your opinions on some of the newer Kings when we last talked because they hadn't played yet. But Pierre-Luc Dubois, or PL Dubois, 4 goals, 4 assists in 14 games this season. Certainly hasn't been bad, but I think that there's probably a feeling that he's got some more to give. I think even Todd McClellan had made some comments as far as that concerned. Your thoughts so far on what we've seen from PL Dubois?
Well, Pierre-Luc Dubois was never in the same category as Kevin Fiala when they got him, right? Fiala, as soon as they got him, we would talk to people and they'd say, okay, he's going to lead the team in scoring in the coming season. He was in the neighborhood of a point per game. I think Pierre-Luc Dubois' career high heading into this season was 63 points. So he had the draft pedigree, he has the talent, but he was never the kind of player who was on pace to produce point-wise the same way that Kevin Fiala was. I think the hope was that if you paired him with Kevin Fiala on a line, the two of them would combine their strengths and you would get a line that matched Fiala's output, not Dubois'. That might have been ambitious. And my concern when you pair star players on a line together is always which players are used to having the puck on their stick. So going back a ways, when the Kings brought in Lucic to play with Kopitar and Gaborik, I was not optimistic that would work because I saw 3 players who operated best when they were the one driving the line. And if you have 3 guys like that on a line together, 2 guys have to adjust their games. I'm not familiar enough with Pierre-Luc Dubois' game to really comment on my expectations for him. But Kevin Fiala has said himself after they jumbled the lines last week, I think it was on Friday after practice, or no, I guess they had Saturday morning after morning skate. Kevin Fiala said he likes the puck on a stick. He feels like he has to be the one driving the line. So if that's the case, then ipso facto, Pierre-Luc Dubois has to take a more, read and react role if Kevin Fiala is going to play that way. And I don't know what the team's, desire for Pierre-Luc Dubois is, but I think a guy with that size, with that skill brought in to cement that role of a center, I think they'd like to see him driving a play and quote unquote leading a line. Also, Todd McClellan has used the phrase captain of a line in past seasons, saying, the team has a captain, but then each line has its own captain. And I don't know who you would name as the captain of that line when it was Dubois, Fiala, and Laferriere. Clearly not Laferriere. But is it Kevin Fiala? Is it Pierre-Luc Dubois? I'm not sure. Moving Fiala to a line with Deneau and Moore, I think, generally speaking, I think you'd expect Deneau to be the captain of that line. And these are not, real designations. This is just practice talk. But, with Dubois playing with Kaliyev and Laferriere, I think the hope is that he becomes the unquestioned focal point of that line, the one who has to drive it, lead it, and be the captain of that line. Whether or not it works, I don't know. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised they jumbled them as early as they did in the season, because home record notwithstanding, they've been excellent on the road. The goals are coming from all over the place, and one could argue that they're coming as a result of the depth. Mm-hmm. And I get that Pierre-Luc Dubois wasn't producing at a high output, but Kevin Fiala still is. And that line was, dominant when it comes to possession metrics and expected metrics. So 13 games in, they chose to mix it up. I was a little surprised they did that so early, especially given the success that the team was having. But again, it's 14 games, and thanks to Edmonton and Calgary getting off to slow starts, the team's still in very good position in the division, and we'll see what happens with Vancouver. But I'm prepared to be patient when it comes to these players.
We talked about goaltending in our last conversation. I think we're both pretty confident that Cam Talbot could get the job done. He certainly has to this point. Overall, the goaltending, I know some people are a little concerned about what's going on with Phoenix Copley. Just your thoughts on what we've seen from the goaltending so far to this point.
Well, I'm going to backtrack on everything I've said, because the goaltending is sort of the perfect pivot point for this point. The Kings, from my perspective, have reached a point now where, unless the floor falls out and things go terribly wrong, we should see the team perform well. We have depth, we have scoring, the goaltending is giving strong performances, but none of that matters till April. This team has been assembled, and the expectations are now such that we want the team to make it out of the first round. Their own rhetoric has been, we're not looking to win a round, we're looking to win the Stanley Cup. They've gone out and acquired, Phil Deneau, Victor Arvidsson, Alex Edler, Kevin Fiala, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Gavrikov, right? They've spent assets to bring in these veterans to bolster the lineup, to get the team success. So, yes, everything that's happening right now is great, but it needs to continue. And to Todd McLellan's credit, he said that. He's talking about the penalty kill this morning after practice, and he said, there can't be slippage. It has to keep building and growing. And that's true of every facet of the game right now, including goaltending. It's great. Everything's great. I'm going to contradict myself from earlier in the show where I say you can't do this, you can't do that. It can't slip. It has to continue on its pace, if not get better. And then ultimately this team's, final judgment, final grade will be based on how they perform in April. And it's annoying for those of us in the sports talk business who talk about every game and talk about every practice, but everything we say between now and April won't amount to much when compared to what happens in April.
Again, last time we spoke, I know you were very optimistic about Quinton Byfield stepping it up this season.
Yes,
you and I have both been supporters of Q, trying to tell people to be patient in a world that doesn't like to be patient, it seems, these days. But second on the team right now with 11 assists, I think it's pretty clear he's looking a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. He's not really thinking, he's doing. It seems more natural. Is this what you expected as far as what we've seen from him, or do you think there's even more that we could get from Q this year?
Both. It's better than I expected, and I still think we might see more. I think I was predicting 20 goals, 60 points before the season started. He's on pace for 76 right now, and the player that I see out there from Quinton Byfield looks incredible, but still doesn't look fully polished or even fully comfortable in his own body. Yep. So I could see yet another, quantum leap from him production-wise. I've said this for the last 2 years. Everything that I heard about him from the guys that we spoke to in Sudbury, everything I saw from him in Ontario was a player that, this is hard to visualize for those listening, but for those who are watching, you're just going to have to watch my hand. The learning curve moves slowly. It doesn't, go straight up. It moves slowly, but then once he grasps his environment, once he gets used to where he is and figures everything out, it spikes. Oops, I moved off camera. But you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have that Stutzla meteoric, like, oh, he hits the league and just starts putting points in. It takes him a while. And, we heard from the guys that covered him in Sudbury, he had disappointing may not be the right word, but a first half that wasn't, stellar. And then I can't remember if he got snubbed for Team Canada or he played third line minutes or something. And there were some questions and public concerns about his, draft stock and who he was as a player. And then when he came back, they said the second half of the year, he was the best player in the league, where he came back with a vengeance. And that's what I saw in Ontario. It took him a while. He was moving up in the league. He was playing against tougher competition. The game completely changed. And it took him a while, but once he sorted it out, all of a sudden the points started coming in bundles. And I think he set the record for most points in the AHL by an 18-year-old, which granted is a small group because it's rare that you're allowed to do that. But yeah, now we see, he first year he broke his ankle and he missed half the season. Last year he missed half the season. He got ill, lost a ton of weight, lost a ton of strength. He sprained his wrists. This season, starting on the top line, he's healthy. He's, adapted to the surroundings. He's playing with two incredible line mates. And yeah, the points are coming and he looks amazing.
All right, we'll take a bit of a look ahead for the LA Kings this season here with Jesse Cohen as we wrap things up here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That is $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. You can bet on the NHL as well. Want to place a bet on our Kings to win Thursday night against the Florida Panthers? Think the over-under will be more or less than 6.5 goals. You can also bet on over-under number of saves for goaltender Cam Talbot, which player will score the first goal, and more. Just use the FanDuel app, which is super easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including point spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and place a bet on the NHL or the NFL this season. It is FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Wrapping up with Jesse Cohen, the host of the All the Kings Men podcast. We talked about it just moments ago. There was a bit of a lineup tweak with Kevin Fiala moving off the Deneau line and Arthur Kaliyev moving to the Dubois line. There was a friend of the show, Austin Stanovich from the Hockey News, suggested another move I saw today. I thought it was interesting, so I thought I'd bring it up with you. He proposed that we get an Alex swap and that Alex Turcotte be called up to replace Alex Laferriere. Not that Laferriere is doing anything poorly right now, but he's kind of come back to earth maybe a little bit. And of course, Turcotte finally staying healthy, former first-round pick, doing pretty well in Ontario. He proposed this as a potential move here in the near future for the Kings. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll separate him into two things. First of all, Alex Laferriere. On All the Kings Men, we have a phrase that we like to repeat over and over and over again, and that is happiness is measured by expectation. And in the lead up to the season and early in the season, we would talk about Alex Laferriere, we being the assembled media, internal and external. And even Jim Fox would laugh and say, it's going to sound like I'm describing the greatest player of all time. And, we don't mean to. I think we may have oversold Alex Laferriere. No disrespect to Alex Laferriere or his game. I think everybody, fans, media, I think the narrative had become so consistently, Kings draft picks don't perform the way that you wanted them to, whether it was Velarde taking a few years to hit or Kempe taking a few years to hit or everybody insisting on comparing Stützle and Byfield. And then you had this kid, Alex Laferriere, who I want to say he was the third-round pick. And he came in and he was his first year pro and he impressed in Ontario at the end of the season last year. And he came in and he grabbed a spot and everybody was excited to have something to talk about. It's one of the reasons I don't really like prospect talk in general, because it's really easy to talk yourself into potential. And then it's rare that the potential is delivered on, even on people that wind up being superstars. Like take a guy like Teemu Selanne. He scored 76 goals as a rookie. If he had done that in 2023, you think people talk about Connor Bedard a lot, right? If a rookie came in and scored 76 goals, it'd be incredible. Nobody ever talks about the fact that that was the most goals he ever scored in his career, was that first season. So Alex Laferriere, I haven't gone through and looked at the numbers yet, but I have a sneaking suspicion if you looked at his progress game by game, you wouldn't see a lot of change. I don't think he's gotten worse or less effective or less impactful. I think one of the things we praised him for early in the season was his consistency and his Workman-like attitude is not what I want to say, because I don't think of him as a lunch pail type player. But one of the things that impressed about him was just he had this very sort of matter-of-fact game. So I'm not sure that he's actually regressed any. I think people were just so impressed with him that we talked him up, and now he's not on pace for 76 goals. And Pierre-Luc Dubois is not on pace for 80 points. And so it's like, well, something must be broke, so we have to try and fix it. As for Alex Turcotte, I would be very curious to know if the organization would want to play him at wing, because he was drafted as a center. Byfield was drafted as a center. They have all these guys that were drafted at center. And for the most part, I believe he's been playing center in Ontario. You'd have to ask Jared Shaffron to confirm that. But I'm pretty sure, based on the notes that I've been keeping about the Reign games, that he's been playing at center. So I think if you call him up and shift him to wing, I'm not sure that's the best use of his talents. Now, if you wanted to experiment with a current center by moving him to the wing and putting Turcotte at center, that would be something I'd be curious about. But I am not presently worried about the overall state of the Kings to the point where I feel like it needs to be fixed yet. There's always room for concern, but I'm not living in that space at the moment.
Well, looking ahead, do you feel confident that what we've seen so far from the Kings is something we can expect to see the rest of the season, injuries notwithstanding, because that's something obviously you can never predict, but and it's, gosh, Lord knows, other than Arvidsson, they've been incredibly healthy so far. But
I've seen people say that, sorry to interrupt, but I do want to say, like, it's very funny to me that we go, well, health has been great other than Arvidsson. Other than the 60-point, 25 goal scoring,
but Jesse,
best player on the team who's out.
Most teams guys are going to get dinged up here and there, and you're going to. I'm not saying you're going to be on long-term injured reserve, but that affects the lineup. The Kings have had 11 games in a row. They had the same lineup, that kind of a thing. So I think
guys will get hurt. But
sure.
to your question about, do I think we'll keep seeing it? I do, and part of the reason I do is that everything we've seen from this team, the highlights of this team when they're playing well, the road record and all that, it's exactly what we were promised. It's what was sold to us as the concept of this team. You're going to get 4 centers down the middle who can play well. You're going to get scoring from up and down the lineups. You're going to have depth. On any given night, your opponent isn't going to know how to match lines with you, because if you throw all your weight behind the Kopitar, Kempe Byfield line, well, then you have to contend with Fiala, Dubois, and, I guess it was meant to be Kaliev originally, but Laferriere now. And if it's not them, then it's Moore and Deneau and, Kaliev, whoever's on that line. And now even the fourth line is producing, right? I think Carl Grundstrom has 6 goals or something. And the defensive pairings have been exactly what you'd want from them. Spence and Englund have rounded into form nicely. We've heard Todd McClellan praise that pair. And we've even heard the players, whether it was Kempe or Talbot or who else said it. I lose track of who said what to me lately these days. I'll just blame COVID. But, they have all talked about the fact that you don't need to worry about matching lines. And on the road, the fourth line wasn't playing a ton of minutes more than they might in any other year. But because the top 3 lines were paired so evenly, you'd have nights where the top line would play 11 minutes, the second line would play 11 minutes, the third line would play 10 minutes, and the fourth line would play 8 minutes. So even though the fourth line is only playing 8 minutes, the gap between the fourth line and the first line is much smaller than it might have been in previous years. And so you get this rolling contribution. And I don't see that changing necessarily. And the goaltending, I'm far from a goaltending expert, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to say that I know that Cam Talbot is playing particularly well, or if he's just the beneficiary of solid play in front of him. But either way, the results are he's putting up very strong numbers, that, again, the Philadelphia game notwithstanding.
He is the host of Kings Talk after every LA Kings game, also pre and post game show, and of course the host of the All the Kings Men podcast. He is Jesse Cohen. Jesse, always a pleasure. Always good to get your insights on things, and good to talk to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Anytime.
All right, and we'll see you out at Crypto here in the near future, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
Maybe just passing in and out of an elevator.
Well, yeah, exactly. We bumped into each other at the last game.
We'll still say hi. Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, Eddie.
All right, that is Jesse Cohen. Like I said, we always appreciate his insights and good stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed that. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up, of course, in the next couple of shows, we'll have a preview of the Kings' next game against the Panthers, update you on all the latest Kings news. We will recap, of course, the game against Florida on Friday and have another fan feedback show as well. You want to send an email to the show, you can do that at any time. It's lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always post your comments below. Stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.